So how did all this come about? What were the big fault lines that opened globally, internationally, so that where the powers that be, their thinking really did fundamentally change? Global financial crisis exploded the belief that we should always leave things to the market because they're so much more rational than government interveners, etc. Just as important and a longer discussion had been happening at the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the IMF, and coming up with a very solid consensus. Well, it's the end of the Washington Consensus, which was the neoliberal sort of framework for development which had been in place through the 80s and the 90s. So what did they say? We need a new economic model, a new development model, and their line was a tag for it was inclusive growth. And of course, Pope Francis has been a real champion, a real mover in this push towards the end of the trickle-down model and towards inclusive growth. I could say a lot more, but just conveying the idea that the big change that I'm inviting you to think about tonight and how you position yourself in this, the transition, it is on. With the Catholic Bishop's statement this year, everyone's business, I thought really did capture this convergence almost of Catholic social teaching and the new thinking embodied in the Paris agreements on the environment and the UN Agenda 2030 about sustainable development. These are seen as two huge and will be, we look back in history, as great landmarks of a move towards a new model. So, and the exciting thing about it is, especially with the UN and inclusive development, sustainable development, they're not just talking as we'd think the UN are, they're talking to poor people and poor countries. They say explicitly, this new social policy, economic policy framework is for all nations in the globe. We all need to be making inclusiveness and sustainability as the centre points, the central focus of our policy developments. And each nation needs to be renewing its social compact or its social contract around these objectives. And of course, with the Sustainable Development Goals, you can go through, if you look up on the internet, they're all there on the coloured page. I forget how many, 17 or something like that. And so that's what we'd be talking about. If we want to be part of the transition, we say, oh, it's the people and it's the planet. There's all those things. If you had the PowerPoint up, take your orders, please. Time for you to be making your choices about what kind of a society do we want to have here in Australia. So now, if you're like me, you might think, oh, that's not for me. That's too big, right? And we don't make choices. Isn't that big corporates and things like that, and they leave it all to the market anyway. So what you need to wake up from is these decades where we were schooled to think that as the Commonwealth for the common good, famous economic statement by the Australian Bishop said in the early 90s, that we were schooled to think that there is no such thing as society. It's the markets and the economy stupid. There's no such thing as society. Tina, there is no alternative. So hands off, put your sleeping caps on, put your hands, sit down, go and take a Bex because we don't want to hear about your choices. All that gets decided through the market economy. And, well, what does it all add up to? As the bishop said back then, well, in this thinking, it all adds up to the GDP. If the GDP grew, well, we know that welfare must have increased and we've got a better society because that was the measure of progress. So leave our development to individual choice in the markets and let's get on with dismantling the public economy, the privatising, the deregulating. I mean, that's the world we've been in for decades. So it's, if you feel a bit uncomfortable about why would I make a choice, why would I bother? Well, that's the world we've been living in, but we've got to come forth from it.